Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. All right. I'm Colonel Dave Gray. I'm the Executive Director here at the Center for Leadership and Ethics. I want to welcome you to VMI and our final speaker in the Courageous Leader series. Now, every year, the Center thinks about and designates a theme to drive our programming during the year. The theme this past year has been adapting to complex situations. And our speaker tonight has a personal story that epitomizes adapting to a complex situation, the loss of his vision. Now, Brad Snyder began his professional career as an ensign in the United States Navy after graduating from the United States Naval Academy with a degree in naval architecture. Through his distinction as the swim team captain during his final year at the Naval Academy, he earned an assignment as an explosive ordnance disposal officer. Brad deployed to Iraq in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom in 2008 and deployed again 2 years later to Afghanistan to support operations during Enduring Freedom. After 6 months of assault operations in Afghanistan, Brad was severely injured by the explosion of a nearby improvised explosive device, or IED. The explosion resulted in complete vision loss for Brad. Fortunately, he did not suffer any other debilitating long-term wounds. A few months later, Brad returned to the pool as part of his rehabilitation process, where he very quickly realized that the pool was a safe space. Within a few months of training, Brad earned a spot on the U.S. Paralympic national team for swimming and went on to compete in 7 events at the 2012 Paralympics in London, where he earned 2 gold medals and a silver medal. Even more impressive, his victory in the 400-meter freestyle in London occurred on 7 September 2012, exactly 1 year from the day that he suffered his vision loss. Now, Brad medically retired from the Navy in 2013. He returned to the Paralympic Games 3 years later in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, and he competed in 5 events, earning 3 gold medals and 1 silver medal, and he broke a 30-year-old world record. After Rio, Brad decided to switch sports to triathlon for a new challenge and won gold for Team USA at the 2020 Tokyo Games. He currently owns 6 gold medals, 2 silver medals, and 1 world record. Well, if that's not enough, when not competing or training, Brad serves as a fellow in the Stockdale Center for Ethical Leadership at his alma mater at the Naval Academy. And he's a leadership instructor for future naval officers. He currently is pursuing a PhD in public policy with the intention of becoming a professor, where he hopes to leverage his personal experiences along with his expertise to inspire future generations. Brad also serves as the athletic representative on the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee's Board of Directors and is the advisory board chair for the Naval Special Operations Foundation. Brad's mission is to study and apply virtue in all aspects of life to empower society's pursuit of happiness. Brad is married to his soulmate, Sarah, and the two live in a lovely home in Maryland with their 2-year-old daughter, Rooney. Please join me with a large round of applause to thank him for his service in representing the United States in the Olympics. Brad Snyder, Paralympian, husband, father, leadership instructor, and veteran. Please welcome Brad Snyder.
Thank you very much, Colonel Gray. Thank you guys, VMI, for inviting me out tonight. It's an honor to be the kind of wrap-up speaker for this series. What my intention is to do is to share with you basically the same story he just told you, but like in my words, and then maybe take some questions and answer after the fact. So I want to thank you very much, Colonel Gray, for a really outstanding introduction. You basically know the ins, outs, and what have yous. But from my perspective, I want to share a little bit more detail about that journey from the battlefield in Afghanistan in 2011 to the podium at the Paralympics in London. As Colonel Gray said, I was a 2006 graduate of the United States Naval Academy, which offhand doesn't sound very significant, but we were the first class to show up to the Naval Academy after the towers came down on September 11, 2001. When I was a senior in high school, I was a recruited swimmer at one places in the United States, which was the Naval Academy, so we're glad that that panned out. And I was supposed to take my swimming recruiting trip on September 14th of 2001. Obviously that didn't happen, and by the time that the dust had settled from the attacks and stuff started to come back online, it was January of 2002. I had already committed to going to the Naval Academy, but I got to take my recruiting trip anyway, which was a nice bonus. But why I'm telling you this is when I got to the Naval Academy, coming from suburban Florida, I had never really traveled a whole lot. So it was a shock to see, A, how cool downtown Annapolis was, not so different from your downtown here. But what I was really astounded by was the front gate of the Naval Academy had a Marine sitting out in front of it behind a sandbag barrier, behind a machine gun, in a flak jacket, pointing his weapon at downtown Annapolis. And I can't think of a better metaphor to codify or exemplify the moment of time we were in. We had just been attacked, and we were a nation at war. And we were very then intent on taking it back to whoever did those ills to us and make sure that that never happened again. So we spent our 4 years I spent my 4 years at the Naval Academy learning naval architecture, as Colonel Gray said. And it was frustrating to be in the classroom learning about buoyancy and gravity and thermodynamics when there was a war going on. And a lot of us couldn't wait to, essentially grow up, get our commissions, and go out and find our way to the fight and contribute. I spent 3 of my years at the Naval Academy thinking I wanted to be a Navy SEAL. I changed my mind in my junior year and discovered the EOD community, which I already gave a couple of you my pitch earlier today, so I'll spare you now. I graduated in 2006, went right down to EOD training in Florida, and then I moved to Charleston, South Carolina, where we used to have our mobile unit, and one of our mobile units, and then from there I deployed to Iraq. Now I got to Iraq in 2008, the fall of 2008, and it was a unique time to be in Iraq. For those who track the history of Iraq, we surged in 2006, 2007, and for all intents and purposes, the surge worked in a lot of different ways. By the time I got there in 2008, it seemed like all the fighting was done. And so instead of doing a lot of EOD response, IED mitigations in support of conventional forces while I was in Iraq, we just did a lot of working with Iraqi bomb disposal units in the Army and then the municipal police on how to respond to IEDs. And I have to tell you, it was a good thing we were there to do that, because the chosen tactic of an Iraqi bomb disposal unit at the time was to give their newest member a pair of clippers and tell him, good luck. They say, Inshallah, in that area of the world. Inshallah means whatever God wills will happen. If God wills him to live, well, by gosh, he'll live. And if God wills him to die, well, then he'll die. And we thought, by gosh, there's a better way to do bomb disposal, And so we spent the next 6 months training them on how to use robots and bomb suits and hooks and lines to mitigate IEDs safely without necessarily unduly risking personnel. I came back to the United States. I moved up to Virginia Beach. I got a real dream set of orders. I told you I spent 3 years at the Naval Academy thinking I wanted to be a Navy SEAL, changed my mind. But then my second deployment was actually going to be as an EOD officer deployed with a SEAL team. So I got to basically be a SEAL and an EOD officer for my second deployment, which was something I was very, very excited about. So I got to do an extra long workup cycle, a 2-year workup cycle, where I got to do a lot of fancy stuff, a lot more shooting than usual, jumping out of aircraft, all kinds of fun stuff. And then I deployed to Afghanistan in 2011. Now, my job in Afghanistan was a little different than my job in Iraq. I was assault support. So as we were moving in assault operations in and around the Kandahar area, I was an embedded explosive specialist with an assault team. That means that any potential explosive hazards that the assault encounters, it's my job to advise the ground force commander on how to avoid that hazard, go around the IED, or if, God forbid, it's in our way and we can't get around it, I might actually have to go hands-on and mitigate that hazard myself. Now, when we got to Afghanistan in 2011, March, April, May, there wasn't a ton going on. And I thought the same thing. The same thing had happened. We missed the war. All the fighting has come and gone. But we make this joke that for those who have served in Afghanistan know, there are really only 2 seasons in Afghanistan. You know, here we have spring, summer, fall, winter. In Afghanistan, they have fighting season and non-fighting season. And the summers are very hot, but that's fighting season because it's the weather permits you to be outside, you know, fighting and whatnot. The winters are so harsh in Afghanistan that essentially all the Taliban goes in the desert to the south and moves over to Pakistan, and they hide for the winter. So it's called non-fighting season. As the summer progressed, as the weather warmed up, fighting increased, and it became more and more of a kinetic deployment. And more we found that the Taliban knew that we had them very much outmatched in terms of person-on-person force. So as a means to mitigate that asymmetric advantage, they started using IEDs. There were IEDs on rooftops. There were IEDs built into the walls of houses. There were IEDs in dead cows. There were IEDs on pathways. If you landed a helicopter somewhere, you bet that there would be an IED there the next time. There were IEDs everywhere. We have this little secret Google on deployment, and you can type in the coordinates of where you think you're going to go on your mission. And I would type in the coordinates of our mission, and this little Google Earth would pop up with chickenpox of all the known or suspected IED emplacements that we would have to avoid in conducting an assault mission on the target village. Knowing that that was my job, I conferred with my partner, Adam, the other EOD technician, on what's the safest way we can get from point A to point B in Afghanistan, given the IED threat that we face. And we decided that the safest way we could get our assault team in and off the target was for us to walk in front of our patrol with a metal detector, looking for pressure plate IEDs. Sort of like that strange fella at the beach on your spring break vacation in his Speedo looking for gold watches. That was us in Afghanistan looking for pressure plate IEDs. I cleared miles and miles and miles of terrain, mission over mission, throughout that summer and into that fall, trying to keep my assault platoon safe. As the summer months wore on, the missions got more and more intense, and there were more and more IEDs, and my job got more and more stressful. On September 7th, 2011, we started what was an otherwise somewhat routine mission in a series of missions that were intended to push all of the bad guys out of this valley called the Panjwai Valley. We were going to essentially march across this Panjwai Valley, push all the Taliban people down into the desert and into Pakistan so they could hide for the incoming non-fighting season, the winter. The way that these missions would typically work is around midnight or so, we would put our entire assault team on 2 big Chinook helicopters. Our assault team was an equal balance of half American, half Afghan. Part of our job was to work hand in hand with Afghan special operators to teach them how to do counterinsurgency operations in their area. We would load up an assault team of about 40 people onto these big Chinook helicopters. We would fly through the mountain valleys of Afghanistan. We would land anywhere from 1 to 7 kilometers away from our target village. And then I would clear our way in, marching us all the way to our target village. We would assault the target village. We would look for bad guys, weapons, whatever else. We would stay for 1 period of light, and then we would exfil the next night and sneak away and get on 2 more Chinook helicopters and go back to our village. That was our mission plan on September 7, 2011. Now, we landed those Chinooks. We marched. I led our platoon into the target village. And when we got there, right around sunrise, we all started to take our night vision off, eat a little breakfast, and we noticed that there was not a soul in our target village. No dogs, no cats, no cattle, no women, no children. And at the back of all of our minds was, why is there no one here? Now, thankfully, those who have served in Afghanistan know that the communication strategy of the Taliban is not all that advanced. It's basically just Radio Shack walkie-talkies. And if you have a Radio Shack walkie-talkie, you can turn to channel 14, which is Taliban net, and you can listen to them talk to each other. And so we turned our little Radio Shack walkie-talkie to channel 14, and we listened to what we estimated was about 12 different Taliban fighters in the area who knew that an American force had landed, and they were intent on mounting an attack on us to push us into an area that they had previously booby-trapped, IEDs. Not wanting to cede the advantage to our adversary, we thought we'd beat them to the punch. We took out our little maps and we triangulated where we thought they were, and we thought we were going to move to contact, as we say. As I mentioned before, there's always 2 EOD technicians with every platoon. So I rock, paper, scissors with my buddy Adam, the other EOD tech. He lost, I won. So he had to lead our platoon from where we were to where we thought the bad guys were. The terrain in this Panjwai Valley is very difficult. Their number one crop in this area is grapes. I always kind of make the joke that once we stabilize Afghanistan, they're going to have really great wine because they have all these grapes in the Panjwai Valley. And the way these grapes grow is on these 4 to 6 foot tall mounds. And the mounds go in neat rows over and over and over again. Football-sized fields over fields over fields, kind of arranged haphazardly, and they all have a wall around the field. Sometimes the wall is only so high, and sometimes the wall is 10 feet tall. And getting around in this area is very difficult. And oh, by the way, people like me make it even more difficult because EOD technicians live by the adage that the path of least resistance is almost always booby-trapped. So we're very unpopular with Navy SEALs or Special Forces guys because we choose the most arduous, most pain-in-the-butt way to patrol. Over the mounds, over the fences, never on the paths, never over bridges, always the hardest possible way because that's actually the safest possible way. So I watched from halfway back in our patrol, I watched my buddy Adam very delicately navigating our platoon from where we were to where we were going. And unfortunately, we encountered what we call a choke point, an area where the terrain dictates that we have to go. This is a very scary position for an EOD technician like myself because it's a great place for a booby trap. There was a 10-foot wall surrounding a giant field on the other side. There was only one area of this 10-foot wall that had been previously blown out by another attack. It was the only way we could safely get around this wall. So I watched my buddy Adam clear up to the rubble that had been previously bombed out. He cleared over, he delicately shimmied to his left and disappeared behind the wall. I watched 3 SEALs do exactly that, delicately follow in Adam's tracks and disappear behind the wall. I watched a few other people, I got distracted for a moment, and then all of a sudden, a giant blast plume shot up into the air. I thought the worst. I thought my buddy Adam had stepped on an IED. He's now badly hurt. He needs assistance, and I need to get up there and help him. But we train that scenario in our training all the time. We call it a mind strike drill. One of the worst things I can do is run up there trying to be a hero and step on another IED. So I waited. I waited to try to make as good an assessment of what was going on as I could. Was it an IED? Are we taking mortar fire? Was it friendly fire? What's going on? I waited for 30 seconds. It seemed like a lifetime, waiting for maybe Adam's voice to come over the radio and tell me he was okay and tell me what was going on. But Adam's voice never came over the radio. I looked back at my boss, the ground force commander, a SEAL lieutenant. He said, if we have to bring in a medevac chopper, we're going to do it in the field to my left. I said, roger that. And I started running up to the front of the patrol. My job in this situation is to clear space for the medic to get to the casualty. One of the worst things we can have is the medic step on an IED. So I need to clear a pathway for the medic to get to the casualty so we can pull the casualty back, land a medevac helicopter, put them on the helicopter so the helicopter can take them to the hospital. When I got up to the crumbled out section of wall, I stepped over and I was instantly very confused. Now, in a post-blast environment, all that dust that's kicked up with the mushroom cloud, it starts to settle back down to the earth. It made this fog, this literal fog of war. I couldn't see what was going on. I looked to my right, I looked to my left, and I was instantly elated to see my buddy Adam giving me the international WTF sign. And I looked back at him, and I gave it right back. Like, what are you looking at me for? I was way back there. What happened up here? He didn't know either. So we started looking around, and what we had found, what had happened was, Adam had cleared a path. On the other side of the wall was this irrigation ditch that had dried out. Adam had shimmied to his left and jumped across the ravine and moved out on the field to his left. 3 SEALs did exactly what they were supposed to, followed in his footsteps, jumped over the ravine, and moved out on the field to the left. The first Afghan in our patrol looked at the way that Adam had jumped over that ravine and said, no, I don't want to do that. I'm gonna walk across this little piece of rubble, making an improvised footbridge over the ravine. I don't have to jump. What did I say? Path of least resistance is almost always booby trapped. There was a 40-pound IED buried in that improvised footbridge. Afghan took one step on it, blew up. He got kicked forward about 15 feet, and the guy standing behind him, another Afghan, lost both legs. So Adam and I were able to ascertain we have 2 badly injured Afghan casualties. We need to get them out of here as quickly as possible. I started working casualty 1, Adam started working casualty 2. I looked back behind me, and I motioned to some of the other Afghans to come help me with the casualty. They all looked at me and went like this. They just watched their buddy get blown up. They weren't exactly excited about coming to help me. So I had to wait for 2 other SEALs to come and help me pick up the casualty and bring him back to where my boss, Gordo, said we could land the helicopter. This took us about 10 minutes. Oh, by the way, I mentioned to you that 12 Taliban fighters are now trying to attack us. They now know exactly where we are. We just shot up a giant coalition forces highlighter. We can't sit here on target any longer. We need to get out of here as quickly as possible, otherwise we're sitting ducks for a counterattack. So from the back of our patrol, I grabbed a litter. Litter's basically a foldable gurney, something you can scoop up a casualty with and bring them back to where we can land the helicopter. We need to move quickly. I grabbed the litter, I ran up to the front of the patrol, I jumped over the ravine and I stepped on a secondary IED that was about a meter away from the first blast site. I woke up in the fetal position, and I could just barely see out of my left eye. I could see my hands, and behind my hands, I could see my boots. What I didn't see was any blood or any damage. Nothing appeared to be wrong. That didn't make any sense to me. I knew that I had just been blown up. As the EOD expert, I knew that the likely size of the explosion was a 40-pound explosion, which is a rather large explosion. How could I be okay? The only way I was able to make sense of that is that I must be dead. I must be dead, and I'm in between. I'm in between life and death, waiting for whatever happens after you die. My experience in that moment was that of time being suspended. There was no one there, just me and my thoughts. And I thought about the life I had lived up until that point. I was 27 years old. I did some really stupid stuff, but I also did some pretty good stuff. I think if you weighed it all in a balance, I think I did okay. I think I'm proud of the life that I lived. I'm proud to have died a part of this rare, amazing brotherhood of warriors that I was a part of. I was proud of offering my life in sacrifice for our liberty. I was sad that I wouldn't be able to say goodbye to my mom or my family, but I thought that they'd be proud too of the life that I had lived. And I felt my grandfather, my hero, was a veteran of World War II. I felt him in that moment, and I thought he was coming. He was coming to take me across. But then something else happened in that moment. All of a sudden, my right ear started to ring really bad. It sounded like, and I thought, oh boy, it's going to be miserable to listen to that for eternity, right? And then out behind the ringing, I could hear my buddy Adam calling to me, Brad. And I started to piece together that I wasn't dead. Another big, thick cloud of dust and debris had been kicked up in the air. My buddy Adam knew I had been hit. He's looking for me, and he can't find me. I yelled back to him. He came over to me, and all of a sudden, I started to panic. A moment ago, I was okay with dying, and now I'm afraid to be alive. Something must be wrong. I took a 40-pound blast to the face. Something's got to be wrong. I grabbed Adam by his armor, and I said, how bad is it? And he said, Brad, I'm not going to lie to you. Your face looks pretty effed up, but the rest of you looks fine. Do you think you can stand up? And in this moment, I realized I had committed the cardinal sin for an EOD officer like myself. I had run around trying to be a hero, and I had missed an IED, now making our problem worse. We're down another person, we're down an EOD officer, and now I'm still holding us up from being able to get out of Dodge and get away from the impending attack from these Taliban insurgents.
I knew in that moment that I need to help my team by getting out of the way. My buddy Adam and the medic Kyle picked me up, and I walked away from that 40-pound blast a short distance to where that helicopter came down and took me to the hospital in Kandahar. Now, they put me to sleep in Kandahar. I had frag all up and down my neck. They were concerned about my ability to breathe, and it turns out being intubated is very uncomfortable when you're awake. So they gave me a sleepy shot. I didn't wake up for 60 hours. During those 60 hours, I spent 12 in surgery in Kandahar. A surgeon and her staff meticulously putting my face back together and addressing a handful of other wounds I had sustained. Once I was medically stable, I was rushed to Longstuhl Air Force Base, Germany, where I spent another 9 hours in surgery. Once I was medically stable, I was rushed to Walter Reed Medical Center in Bethesda, Maryland. Now, when I woke up in Bethesda, Maryland, I was on heavy amounts of opiate painkillers and sleep medication. And so my recollection of the hospital is very distorted and scary and weird. It's a lot like that Willy Wonka in the Chocolate Factory movie, the Johnny Depp one, the really weird one, not the Gene Wilder happy one, the Johnny Depp super weird one. That's what the hospital looks like to me. And I kept asking my mom about the Oompa Loompa doctor. When's the Oompa Loompa doctor coming back? And my mom would look at me strangely and say, there is no Oompa Loompa doctor. We don't know what you're talking about. But for me, Oompa Loompa doctor was very real, because when the real doctor would come in and talk, in my mind, I'd see an Oompa Loompa talking to me about all the things that were wrong with me. So you can imagine how confusing that all is. So it took me about 5 days to really wrap my head around where I was and what was going on. And on that 5th day, the surgeons were back in the room and they were talking about one final surgery I was gonna have to go through. And they kept using this phrase that didn't make a lot of sense to me. They kept saying, hopefully if the surgery is a success, we'll get some of your vision back. Hopefully we'll get some of your vision back. Get some of your vision back? What was he saying? So I asked him at the end of his brief, I said, what do you mean get some of my vision back? He said, Lieutenant Snyder, you have a less than 1% chance of being able to perceive light and dark with your right eye. We have to remove your left eye entirely so you'll be blind on that side. Less than 1% chance? Light and dark? What I realized that doctor was saying is that I was blind, and I would be blind for the rest of my life. Up until that moment, I didn't realize that I wasn't seeing with my eyes, I was seeing with my mind. I didn't realize Oompa Loompa doctor wasn't real. It was a manifestation of my imagination. And here I have a doctor telling me that my eyes don't work and they won't work. Spoiler alert, that surgery was not a success. I have no light perception on either side. Now, I think in these kinds of moments, each of you will face a moment like this. I hope to God that it's not an IED in Afghanistan and you go blind. I think that's my thing, but you guys will face something. And at that point, you have two choices. At this inflection for me, I could start to think about all the things I'll never be able to do as a blind person. I'll never be able to drive a car. I'll never be able to fly an airplane. Not that I've ever really wanted to fly an airplane, but I just want to be thorough with my can'ts, right? I grew up on the Gulf Coast of Florida, some of the most beautiful beaches in the world. I'll never be able to see them. But I realized pretty shortly after I started going down this list that this list is futile. And there's an alternative. The other option is to realize how lucky I am to still be alive. 5 days prior to that moment, I thought I was dead. But I didn't die. I came back. I was given a second chance. And I was given a second chance in a way that many others were not. In that hospital room, I thought about my buddy Tyler Trahan, my best friend through EOD school. Tyler and I high-fived in and out of Iraq. As I was leaving Iraq, Tyler was on his way in with a SEAL team. He was an EOD technician supporting a SEAL team, and then volunteered to go out and do some voluntary bomb disposal with some Marines outside of Ramadi. The Marine team lead thought that they had rendered the IED safe. They were bringing the main charge back to the rear of their Humvee, and it detonated, killing Tyler and 3 Marines instantaneously. I was at home at the time, so I was able to go to Tyler's funeral in Freetown, Massachusetts, where they put that flag-draped coffin in the ground, folded that flag, and gave it to his mother, and thanked her for her sacrifice. When I came back to the US, I wasn't in a coffin. There was no flag draped over it. I came back on a gurney with 2 arms that work, 2 legs that work, a heart that works, a brain that works, mostly. and an endless set of opportunities in front of me to make the most of everything I have left. And every one of those endless opportunities is a moment that Tyler doesn't have. And moreover, he gave it up. He gave it up willingly. He signed his name on the dotted line saying, I know that there's a possibility I won't come back, and I'm okay with that, so that everybody else can have their way of life protected, preserved, to ensure that nobody will feel the way we felt on September 11th, 2001. How selfish of me would it be to victimize myself over the loss of my vision when my buddy Tyler didn't get to come back at all? I made a commitment in that hospital room that day that blindness wasn't going to be anything that confined me or redefined me. I was going to make the most of everything I had left, whatever, come what may. Now, I wish that there was this magical movie moment, right, where we all put our hands in the circle in the hospital room. We were like, all right, blindness on 3. 1, 2, 3, blindness. That's not how it was. And, adapting to blindness is very unglamorous, right? All these things that used to be very easy, from putting toothpaste on the end of your toothbrush to figuring out what color shirt you have on or just walking down the hallway, all of these things are now insurmountably difficult for me as a newly blinded person. But I kept telling everyone, I'm grateful to be alive. I'm going to make the most of everything I have left. I'm going to keep on charging. Don't be upset. This is okay. I'm going to be fine. And I was struck by all the people who were coming to visit me in the hospital. They would all hug me, and they would cry, and they would hug me, and they would cry. And they just couldn't imagine what my life would be like without being able to see. I think it reflected a very deeply held schema in our society about disability. We feel like anybody who doesn't have the same characteristics that we do is doomed. They're doomed to watch reruns of Magnum PI for the rest of their life. Which, I like Magnum PI, but there's more to me than that. And I was desperate to show that. And I wanted to show not only myself, but my family, my friends, and my network that I was not going to be confined by my blindness. I needed an opportunity to show them. I realized talk is cheap. I could do all that toxic positivity crap all day long. I'm gonna be fine, I'm gonna be fine. No one was gonna believe it till they could see it. Right around that time, I got a call from this guy named Rich at the United States Association of Blind Athletes. He was telling me, as the military outreach coordinator for the Association of Blind Athletes, yes, we have an Association of Blind Athletes, he called me and said, my job is to give resources to wounded vets to get them into sports as a function of their rehab. He went on to say, do you realize how lucky you are to be injured in a Paralympic year? And I said, no, I hadn't thought of it that way, but I like your attitude. And he said, if you hurry, I can get you this swim meet in Colorado Springs, and we can get you qualified and classified to go to the Paralympic Games. And I said, well, the one problem, Rich, is I'm not out of the hospital yet. He said, we can figure that out. So I literally flew from the hospital to a swim meet in Colorado Springs. I swam a 50-meter freestyle, which is one length of the pool. I dove off the blocks and immediately trucked into the left-hand lane line. I overcorrected and trucked into the right-hand lane line. And then I overcorrected and trucked into the left-hand lane line. And by the time I got to the wall on the other side, I was coming out, I was bloody, I was bruised. Having been a swimmer all my life, I knew that swim had to have been terrible. But then just then, someone comes over and claps their hand on my back and said, oh my God, that was awesome. And I was like, what race were you watching? That was not awesome. They said, you're the 5th fastest blind swimmer in the world after that race. And I thought, well, good God, if I could just swim straight, I'd probably be pretty good at this, right? So that's exactly what I set out to do. I started training with the best blind coach in the world. Turns out to be Brian Leffler, the head coach of the swimming program at Loyola University in North Baltimore. Within a matter of months, Brian helped me straighten out just a little bit, and I was able to raise that number 5 world ranking to a number 1 world ranking in 2 events, the 100-meter freestyle and the 400-meter freestyle, which officially named me to the U.S. Paralympic national team and got me an invite to join Team USA for the impending Paralympic Games to be hosted after the Olympics in September of 2012. It was awesome, right? So I go back to my coach, I go back to Baltimore, and I'm training with my coach, and he comes out of his office one day with a piece of paper, and he said, Brad, they just came up with the order of events for the games. You want to go through it and come up with our plan? And I said, yeah, coach, that sounds like a good idea. He said, on the first day, you'll swim the 100-meter freestyle. It's not your best event, but it'll be a good chance to get your feet wet, if you pardon my pun. And on day 2, swim 100-meter breaststroke, by far your worst event. But these international meets are very, very strange, lots of rules. big crowd. It'll be advantageous for us to get in and out of the competition pool as many times as possible in anticipation of your main event. We got quiet for a second. He said, on September 7th, 2012, you'll have the chance to swim the 400-meter freestyle. Now, the significance of that day, that's the day that I lost my vision in Afghanistan. The significance of that event, it was an event I was favored to win by 20 seconds. You can't write a better sports story than that, right? So as you might imagine, leading up to the games, there was all this media attention and buzz. Well, it was Paralympics in 2012, so a sports writer in Philly wrote an article, and we were super excited about that. I remember this sports writer asking me, so Lieutenant Snyder, are you nervous to compete in the Paralympic Games for the first time? And unfortunately, I said the first arrogant thing that popped in my mind. I said, no. I said, sir, I used to defuse bombs in Afghanistan for a living. How hard could Paralympics be? He laughed and he put that in the article, and I remember reading it afterward thinking, yeesh. That was kind of a dick thing to say, right? Not exactly the pillar of humility with that remark. And I tell you what, I really regretted that attitude when I got to the Paralympic Village in London and I started walking around the Paralympic Village, listening to all these athletes from different countries and different languages talking about different events. Events we know and love, like swimming and track and field, to events we're lesser familiar with, like goalball, a sport for only blind people, or wheelchair basketball or seated volleyball, sports that have been adapted from their Olympic counterparts for those with disabilities. Truly spectacular. Then I walked out into a swimming venue surrounded by 18,000 seats. I thought back to my able-bodied swimming career. I thought, what's the biggest crowd I ever swam in front of? The pinnacle of my able-bodied swimming career was the Army-Navy swim meet at the Naval Academy, as you might imagine. And I'm happy to tell you we won the Army-Navy swim meet all 4 years I was there. How many people do you think we can fit into Lejeune Hall at the Naval Academy? About 1,000, right? So Paralympics, 18 times the biggest crowd I've ever swam in front of. Oh yeah, by the way, they're European hooligan fans who are 3 Guinnesses deep, right? So they are a rip-roaring crowd, right? They are super excited to see the Yank go, right? Now, these races in the Paralympics work strangely, where you have to check into your event well in advance, like 45 minutes in advance of your event. And you have to do like a military VMI style inspection about your competition gear. There's all kinds of rules about the length of your suit. It has to have a QR code. The branding can only be so big. Your goggles have to be a particular type with no offensive logos or whatever else. Your cap has to be this and the flag has to be on the right side. It can only be 3 inches by 5 inches and so on and so forth. Once you pass this regimented inspection, you sit in these sets of chairs. There's like, 6 sets of 8 chairs. This represents the evening's program of events, the finals. And as each heat walks out onto the pool deck, you advance in these sets of chairs. Now, the first set of chairs is in this random hallway in the middle of the venue, and all you can hear is the iPod of the guy next to you. And I thought it was remarkable because he was Chinese. He doesn't speak any English. What do you think he's listening to? Hotel California by the Eagles. Whatever your jam. Anyway, a moment later, a referee comes by and escorts you to the next set of chairs, then the next set of chairs, and the next set of chairs, and all of a sudden you're right next to this doorway that takes you out onto the pool deck where those 18,000 screaming fans. And then they announce,
Please welcome the competitors for the S11 400-meter freestyle.
which is my event. And I walked out onto that pool deck. Now, if this doesn't sound nerve-wracking enough, as swimmers, we basically strip down into underpants in front of 18,000 people, right? I have been through some hair-raising situations, from jumping out of aircraft, taking apart bombs. I promise you, Paralympics ended up being one of the most nerve-wracking experiences of my life. But then this magic thing happens. After I got down into my competition gear, my coach put my hand on the block. And all of a sudden, I could vividly imagine the block, the sandpaper on top. In front of the block was a 50-meter lane. A lane line on either side, a long black line down the middle, clear blue water. 50 meters away, there's a wall. I've swam back and forth in a pool just like this millions of times in my life. I'm the oldest competitor in the field. I've been to war and back twice. I know this race is mine. All I have to do is execute. My favorite moment in sports, the referee blows the whistle 3 times, meaning the whole crowd has to go dead quiet. Blows the whistle one more time, and we set up on the block.
Take your mark.
And I dove off and I make this joke that, blind swimming is really unique in the gamut of Olympic and Paralympic sports for the reason that if you think about it really hard, it's 8 totally blind dudes trucking down the lane at full speed. It's kind of like NASCAR, like crashing is kind of inevitable, right? And so the simultaneous reaction of everybody in that venue is to go like this. And trust me, that's exactly what's going through my mind. I'm doing my strokes and I'm just thinking, if I can just not crash through this race, it's mine, right? So I get through lap 1, I'm feeling good. Get through lap 2, through the first 100, butter smooth. The first 100 always feels good, right? I get into lap 3, I get a little close to that left-hand lane line, but I catch it with my hands. I push myself back into the clean water. Bada bing, bada boom. Lap 3's done, lap 4's done. Feeling a little bit of the burn going into my third 100, but I building my legs to get me through. I'm into my last 100, lap 7, done with my last flip turn. I feel the crowd getting super loud. I think they're cheering for me, but I don't know, so I just pound it in as hard as I can and touch the wall. Now, there's something else that's unique about blind swimming in the gamut of Olympic and Paralympic sports. For those of you who are old enough, can you remember the major storyline out of the London Olympic Games? Which, as it would happen, is the exact same storyline for the Rio Olympic Games. Phelps, supposed to be his last games, right? Michael Phelps, greatest Olympian of all time. He won like 400 medals, right? All of them gold, all of them world records. What happens when Michael Phelps touches the wall at the Olympic Games? He looks up at a Jumbotron that says Michael Phelps wins again, right? What does Michael Phelps do when Michael Phelps wins? He splashes the water, right? He splashes it again. He fist pumps. He gives it 2 for victory. He looks over at that trash-talking South Africa guy and he's like, "What now, South Africa?" Well, none of that happens in the blind heat because we can't see the Jumbotron. So I finished the race of my life, right? That story may have come true. Navy sailor gets blown up and wins a gold medal on the year anniversary of the day he lost his vision. I got this tingly feeling in my fist and I just want to fist pump. But what kind of idiot am I going to look like if the guy in lane 8 had the race of his life and I actually got second, right? So not wanting to look foolish, I just sat there on the lane line. 18,000 people in that arena, they can all see the Jumbotron and they're super stoked about something, but I don't know what it is. Then the announcer announces the outcome and it sounds like this. What? So then I feel the guy next to me finish, so at least I beat him, right? My inclination is to lean over and be like, "Hey man, what happened?" But he's blind too. He's Ukrainian and doesn't speak any English, so we just sat there. Finally, all the competitors have finished, and my coach they blow the whistle another time, meaning they want us to get out of the water. And at that point, my coach could legally talk to me. He said 2 words I'll never forget. He said, "You won." That story came true. I won a gold medal on the exact year anniversary of the day I lost my vision in Afghanistan at the Paralympics in London 2012. And it was a cool moment, right? So you get out of the water at that time, and now you know the crowd is cheering for you, right? So you wave and they cheer, and you wave and they cheer, and then you go talk to all these media folks from all over the world who want to jam a microphone in your face and ask you, "How does it feel to be a gold medalist?" And you say something that you think sounds profound in your mind at the time. This is like what I think I sound like. "Hello, I'm Brad Snyder, and I just won a gold medal." What I actually sounded like is, "I just won a gold medal. I'm just so happy, excited. I just want to see my mom." I watched it on YouTube. It's very embarrassing. So anyway, you go and do that, and then you go take a pee test to make sure you're not doping, and then you go to the podium. The podium's a really cool moment, right? Because they announce winning the gold medal for the United States, Brad Snyder, and you step up, and they give you this medal, and they give you a bouquet of flowers, and they do this European kissy kiss thing. It's kind of a cool moment, right? Attaboy, Brad, you did something cool and your country's proud of you. That's a pretty fleeting sentiment. Why? What happens afterward? They play our national anthem, and they raise our flag higher than all the other flags in that arena. As I stood at attention listening to our anthem play, I started to think about all the people who had had a hand in getting me to that moment. To Adam and the medic Kyle, who got to me in the battlefield dusted me off, stood me up, and got me to a helicopter where the pilot put himself, his flight crew, and his aircraft at risk to land in an IED-laden zone to take me to the hospital. To the surgeon, she and her staff spent 12 hours putting my face back together. To the same crew who did the same thing in Longstuhl Air Force Base, Germany, to the same crew who did the same thing in Walter Reed Medical Center in Bethesda, Maryland. To my mom, who got that call at 5:30 in the morning saying her son had been blown up. She needs to get to Maryland as quickly as possible. To my brothers and my sister, who wrapped their arms around my mom and got her through those trying circumstances. To that crazy fellow on the phone who told me I was lucky to be injured in a Paralympic year. To my coach, Brian Leffler, who figured out how to keep me straight. To all the people and the European hooligan fans in that arena, to all the friends of mine in the military who were able to watch the live stream of this race from places like Iraq, Afghanistan, Virginia Beach, San Diego. To Tyler. Without him, that moment wouldn't have been possible either. His ultimate sacrifice paved the way for me to make the most of every opportunity I have left. In that moment, I realized that individuals never accomplish anything truly great. It's when communities can come together towards a cohesive effort. That's where magic happens. That's why my gold medal was possible. The parting thought I want to leave you with is think about that flag. Our 50 stars and our 13 stripes. That means something different for all of us, but it's all of ours. That flag is all of ours. We are all that flag. We are all what makes that flag great. We are all stars on that flag. To me, what that means is we have a duty to that star. We need to be the absolute best versions of ourselves every day because we all depend on each other. We don't know when we're going to be called upon to help each other. But it was clear to me on that day when I won that every little piece of that puzzle, Adam, Kyle, Tyler, my mom, all of those little pieces added up to something extraordinary. You never know what your little piece is. So you have to live every day as though you're giving that little piece to everybody else. Be your star. Be the best version of yourself because we're all stars in each other's orbits. The parting thought I have for you is earn your star. Thank you guys very much. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we have time for a few questions. What I'd like you to do, if you have a question, please queue up behind one of the microphones and wait for me to recognize you, and Brad will be happy to answer your questions.
Sir, what specifically drew you to the Navy EOD community?
So, I told this story at greater length to the swim team this afternoon, so I would say find a swimmer and they'll give you the full version. But I would say early on in my time at the academy, I spent a lot of time thinking about what's my unique strength, right? You guys probably all feel this. In your local communities, I'm willing to bet that most of you were exceptional at your high school. You're probably one of the kids with the best grades. You're probably one of the best athletes, probably one of the most natural leaders. And then you came to a place like VMI and you're like, holy cow, like everybody is that here, right? That was my experience at the Naval Academy. I was an exceptionally good student in Florida. I was a great athlete. Relative to everybody in my local area, I felt like I was a hotshot. Got to the Naval Academy and realized, holy crap, everybody here is hotshots. So that's humbling, right? So I started to think about, well, what's unique that I bring to the table? I'm not the smartest guy here. I'm actually not the best athlete here. What do I have that other folks don't? I had aquatic competence. I was exceptionally good in the water. And so I thought, what career is going to allow me to exploit that strength? I said to the selection people, I want to be a Navy diver. And they said, we don't do that here. So I said, what's the closest thing to that? They said, Navy SEALs or EOD. I didn't know what EOD was, so I spent a long time thinking I wanted to be a Navy SEAL. And on one of my midshipman cruises, I got exposed to the EOD community, And one of the officers in that community told me it was the best kept secret in the Navy. And I have to say, I think it actually is. It was a remarkable community with an incredible skill set, excellent training. We embed with everybody. We work, Navy EOD works with SF, we work with Navy SEALs, we work with conventional Army, we work with Rangers, we embed with everybody. And we're very prideful of the fact that we're the priority brand as far as explosive mitigation is concerned. We can do free fall, we can embed with anybody, we can go anywhere in the world, we can mitigate any hazard. That's our call. And I like that. I also like that my mission, this is gonna sound really weird, but my mission wasn't to kill anyone. I was really twisted around in my head about military ethics and the ethics of war. And I like that my job primarily was the protection of people, removal of these explosive hazards. I felt really good about that. And so I made the switch from wanting to be a SEAL to an EOD officer my junior year and never looked back. It was an incredible career, incredible people, incredible memories. And I'm proud to say I still am very connected to that community in helping to get the Navy Special Operations Foundation off the ground. So it's a nonprofit that supports directly Navy EOD and Navy diver community.
Thank you, sir.
I want to hear you. Thank you. I'll go back to my hiding place.
There you go. You're good. Next question. Yes, sir.
So you said the swimming was the most nerve-wracking part of your entire life. As EOD, what's that feeling that you get? Like, are you ever scared when you're doing your job with the, having to guide people around, usually your first, or at some point does instinct sort of just kick in and you become less scared?
I don't think it's instinct. I think it's training. I think I never was in a combat instance that I didn't feel extremely trained for. Combat's uncertain and things are crazy, but I felt like we had mapped out all the potential scenarios and we knew what to do in every scenario. If we're taking fire from this position, here's what we're going to do. I mean, I had the good fortune to work with a SEAL platoon in Afghanistan, and I would say that their overall cognizance and performance in terms of land warfare and all of those sorts of things was incredibly great. Like, we felt not only highly trained, but we felt like we were better than anybody at whatever this was. So it's like, I dare you to attack us. There's no way you can attack us in a way that we're not going to be able to outmaneuver you. So there was some kind of, I don't know if it's false bravado or whatever, but there was a confidence in, we know what we're doing and we're best in class at this. So bring it on. And I felt very confident in my training. I was most scared before and after every mission. Like on the Chinook, the ride out onto target for me was always very unpleasant because that's when I couldn't do anything. I'm just sitting there and I'm just thinking about all the things that can happen on this mission. And I'll add the context of, if you guys are tracking the history, extortion, it was extortion 17 went down during that deployment. The Dam Neck helicopter that had, I think it was like 34 people on board, got shot down by an RPG and went down. It was a Chinook helicopter, all 34 people died. That happened while I was there. And what did we take the target every night? Chinooks. And what do people want to do every night is shoot at Chinooks. And what does a Chinook do when it's shot at with an RPG? It shoots chaff out the back and evasively maneuvers. And that happened relatively frequently. So I'd be sitting on the ramp of the Chinook and the Chinook would shoot chaff and evasively maneuver. And I didn't always know that that was going to happen. So I thought we got hit like a bunch of times. And so like the Chinook ride was always A, scary because I thought there was a high possibility we'd get shot down. And then B, it was scary because I knew the second I got off that ramp, my job was to look for these IEDs. And that's when I had the least amount of control. If it's going to happen, I can't do anything about it. Once I actually got on target and I was actually doing the job, I think the confidence of my training always helped me do the job. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Got a question over here at your 10 o'clock.
Sir Cadet Justin Peterson, thank you for your service and thank you for your sacrifice, sir. VMI greatly appreciates you speaking to us tonight.
Thank you.
My question for you is, with all the amazing things you've accomplished in your life, what keeps you going? What provides that inspiration for you to keep on pushing forward?
I think you guys have probably covered this in your class, the kind of dichotomy between growth mindset, fixed mindset. I think a fixed mindset is, I want to get a bunch of credentials, and that will allow me to have a career, which will allow me to make money, and then I'll be happy, right? That's a very fixed and linear way of living. Whereas someone who embraces a growth mindset understands that each new day, each new endeavor, each new challenge is ripe with opportunity for you to learn something new. And that never changes. You can always turn into something else. As much as I've learned about swimming, I know nothing about triathlon. As much as I know about triathlon, I know nothing about public policy. As much as I know about public policy, I know nothing about philosophy. As much as I learn about philosophy, I know nothing about Chinese history. There's endless opportunities out there for you to dive into something and learn and develop and become better, wiser, stronger, fitter, smarter, better than you were a moment ago. I like to think I've tried to embrace as much as possible a growth mindset. I'm not trying to aggregate experiences or bona fides or a resume or a story about myself. I'm just trying to find experiences that are going to challenge me to grow and learn and become more wise. And I hope the second I get bored with something, I move on to something else. I just want to make the most of every little minute I have here. You think your life's really long, and it's not. It's short. It's a succession of moments, and none of us will squeeze every drop that the earth has to offer in our lifetimes. But that's not going to stop me from trying. Does it make sense?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Good evening, sir. My name is Dylan Apo. So you talked about how you were the first class to enter the Naval Academy after 9/11. How did that affect your time at the Naval Academy, knowing that you were most likely going to go to war?
I think it had sort of like a double-edged sword. On one hand, the feeling of unity, the feeling of purpose, the feeling of relevance, the feeling of like general motivation and esprit de corps was through the charts. All of us knew that we were engaged in something important, purposeful, and we couldn't wait to go find our ways to the front lines and help in any way we possibly could. There was a feeling of meaning to our careers that perhaps didn't exist the previous year or even the previous decade potentially. So that was a real palpable advantage. I think on the disadvantage side, there were people like me who just felt like, why the hell do I have to do statics and dynamics homework? Why do I have to do thermodynamics? What does this have anything to do with being a naval officer? I can tell you for sure at this age, I can see the benefit in totality of an undergraduate education, learning to think like an engineer, learning how to use Excel to do really, really fancy things, understanding big math and understanding how to manage time and do all these difficult assignments. But I was not that mature back then. If it didn't have a direct impact on what I thought I'd be doing in my job, I got cynical about it. And I wasn't the only one. So there was a lot of people who were like, had a terrible attitude about school. And if I regret one thing in my life, I think I regret that. I was a poor student at the Naval Academy because I didn't see the point. And I look back on that and thought, if I had just did what I just told you to do about adopting a growth mindset and made the most of my time in my classes, I'd probably be better off than I am today. But that was where I was at back then. So I guess the time and the context had a double-edged sword, at least for me. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
We have time for two more questions. I'm going to get the last question. One more. Off to your 10 o'clock.
Sir, thank you for talking. I was curious on what the training looked like between the accident and going to the Olympics and some of the hidden techniques of learning to swim without seeing.
The question's about specifically the blind aspects of swimming?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, you got it. So let's see, I've got actually some visual show and tell here. So the way that you swim the crawl stroke is this way, right? Ask all the swimmers in the room that hopefully all of them came because I asked them to. This is how you do the crawl stroke, right? When I adapted to blind swimming, I did a drill that we call fingertip drag, which means when I'm recovering my arm, I'm actually dragging my fingertips on the surface of the water. We do it in swimming to help train having a high elbow on our arm recovery, but for me, it's actually allowing me to look for the lane line. I actually drag my fingertips out here and out here. What I'm doing is I'm looking for the lane line. If I hit the lane line with my right hand, that means I'm over on the right-hand side of the lane. And that means all I have to do is just aim over so slightly back to the middle of the lane to keep myself in the clean water. Vice versa, if I hit the left, I just push back to the right. It's much better to touch with my fingers on the lane line than to crash full force in with my shoulder. Obviously, that's like rumble strips on the freeway, right? I'm not going very fast if I'm rumble stripping on the lane line. So I've adapted my fingertip drag on the regular stroke. Then, as I'm going down the lane, I'm always counting my strokes to give myself a perception of how far in the lane am I. My average stroke rate's probably 38 strokes per 50 meters. When I'm feeling really good, it might go as low as 34. When I'm feeling really crappy and really tired at the end of a race, it might be as high as 43. But I still have a general idea of what my stroke count is, so I know where I am on the lap. And then when I get to the other side of the pool, a teammate of mine, ideally my coach, is standing on the edge of the pool, waiting for me to approach the wall. And as I get about this far away, he taps me on the back, right between my shoulder blades, to let me know that I'm about 1.5 meters away from the wall. We train that in practice over and over and over again so that I know as soon as I get that tap between the shoulder blades, I'm gonna do my flip turn. I'm gonna flip over with my feet, catch the back of my somersault, and I'm gonna push off and go the other way. So those are the only adaptations really. All the rest of it is just swimming as fast as you can. You know what I mean?
Thank you so much.
You got it.
Brad, you've talked a lot about growth mindset. You've already talked a fascinating path since your injury. Right now, you're studying you're getting there on your PhD.
That's right.
Getting ready, and you want to go back and teach at the Stockdale Center.
Correct.
Can you tell us what importance is there about going back to the Stockdale Center and talking to future officers about ethics and leadership? Why do you want to do that?
Well, I think it's almost the same answer as the why did I go into EOD, right? I looked at it when I was a sophomore, a junior at the Naval Academy. I thought, what do I have that maybe some other people don't? What's my unique advantage? I think my unique advantage is this very bizarre set of life experiences that I've had, that I've recounted some of them to you now. So what the hell do I do with that? What good is that set of experiences in the world? Who uniquely cares about my perspective as it pertains to these matters? You guys do. Far more than the undergraduate population of Temple University or Arizona State or whatever else. Why? Because you all are service-minded. You want to get an undergraduate education so that you can go make your communities better, so that you can protect our country, so that you can protect your local community, so that you can dedicate yourself to service. The same is true for the population at the Naval Academy. Every midshipman who swears their oath on I-Day wants to serve something bigger than themselves. So I thought, from a practical standpoint, teaching and speaking is something that I can absolutely do the hell out of without my vision. I don't need to be able to see to stand here and talk in front of you guys tonight. I don't need to see to be able to teach you about leadership and ethics. I don't need to be able to see to be able to tell you about how my experiences might inform your life's journeys as you navigate a life of service. And so I wanted to be able to establish myself as a professor, learn what I need to learn to be able to teach you what you need to know about the academic side of leadership, the academic side of philosophy, the academic side of ethics, and empower you to pursue a meaningful career in service. I want to work at a place like this or the Naval Academy, that your population is of like mind as far as the emphasis on character, the emphasis on honor, and above all, a life in service. Does that make sense?
That's a great answer.
Thank you, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me.
Thank you very much.
So we want to offer this as a token of our appreciation on the behalf of the Corps of Cadets, the Superintendent, Commandant, and our faculty and staff. We thank you very much for speaking this evening.
Thank you very much.